Alright guys, welcome back to Formula 1 news, and after Ferrari have slipped back from having the fastest car at the start of the season to now being on the verge of placing third in this year's Constructors' Championship, Mattia Binotto has revealed that their intention is to switch their focus from this year's car to next year's Ferrari. Once again, it's Ferrari saying, look, it's next year, that's when we're going to do the damage. Is this too early, or is this understandable given the way their season has gone? Very much intrigued your thoughts in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoy. Subscribe if you are new as always, I would greatly appreciate it. Couple of quick updates to bring you guys. First of all, of course, this is what the new Ferrari rear wing looks like with the lower downforce model. They will be running here for Monza. The new, yellow on the car looks pretty cool. Not a massive fan of it, but I suppose it is what it is at the end of the day. This also on the driver market for next season. Lots of talk about what's going to go on for Haas. Of course, we know what a lot of the top teams are playing at, but Alpha Tauri, you would think if Gasly was going to be moving on to Alpine, as maybe it looks like it will happen, maybe it won't. You'd think a Red Bull Junior driver, of which there are many, Vips of course, Deruvala, like Hauger and Lawson and these guys in Formula 2 might, potentially get their call up, but they haven't really impressed Helmut Marko apparently. They, effectively he was saying they needed to either win the championship if they wanted to get recruited, and that none of them have done that. Apparently Ayumu Iwasa has impressed Helmut Marko lately, but he reckons he's going to need another year in F2 to get to the point where he could potentially get the seat. So pretty interesting that none of the junior drivers for Red Bull have really impressed them to the point where they're not going to put any of them in the AlphaTauri next season. Therefore, they're trying to get this Colton Herta guy over from IndyCar. Haas, another big question, because as time progresses, it seems less and less likely Mick Schumacher will be able to retain a seat in Formula 1. This is surprising to me. I thought he kind of came good since Austria, let's say, or even since the end of the Silverstone race, where he was trying to fend off, or at least trying to overtake, actually, Max Verstappen at the end of that Grand Prix. Since then, I think he's been significantly better than he was at the start of the season, and certainly last season as well, especially compared to a solid driver in Kevin Magnussen, and in a car that seemingly they're also not putting that much focus in at the moment. So he says, look, I don't know whether I'm going to be here next year. You've got to talk to Günther Steiner about that one. And we know that Antonio Giovinazzi will compete in Free Practice 1 this weekend. Apparently this is just because Ferrari want him to do it or something like that. I don't think Giovinazzi is their number one guy they want to replace Schumacher with if they are going to do that. But of course these are, well, he is one of the potential options at least. Apparently the new front runner is Nico Hülkenberg, which is kind of maybe not surprising but interesting nonetheless, that a Hülkenberg might be back in a Formula 1 seat yet again. He was, of course, briefly in the Formula 1 seat this season when he replaced Sebastian Vettel in Bahrain and in Saudi Arabia. But he might be back in a Haas next year. Apparently, Giovinazzi's FP1 run is just concerned with helping the Italian with his simulator work for whatever reason, so thought that was rather interesting to note as well. Now, the issue is that Riccardo could be an option for Haas. Apparently, the Haas next year has got some decent upgrades. Their focus is going towards it. Maybe they'll be good at the start of next season, kind of like how they were at the start of this season. Could be a seat for Riccardo. The thing is, he's not really delivering. Even now, the pressure is off, you could argue. Maybe not the pressure's off really in the McLaren seat, but Riccardo, his future is set now. He doesn't have the pressure of the expectations for McLaren to deliver results to keep his seat, but he still has to deliver if he wants to get a seat next year, to be honest. But apparently his recent performances, which again haven't been particularly special, could impact his chances with Haas next year, and therefore they are largely considering other options as it stands. Lewis Hamilton said that if he was the manager for Daniel Ricciardo, he would certainly give him a seat. He thinks he's certainly talented enough to be with the rest of the guys, but it doesn't necessarily seem like Daniel Ricciardo will even get a seat next year. Maybe it's just that McLaren doesn't suit him particularly well. We've seen that with other drivers in the past, that the McLaren has taken the life out of some of these guys to a certain extent, and maybe a similar story here with Daniel Ricciardo next season. Now, speaking of Haas, where he might potentially go, apparently they've already spent several months focusing on their next year's car, says Günther Steiner. So kind of, to a certain degree, writing off this year's model. Makes sense in fairness. It's kind of what they did last year, right? When that car is okay, we're not going to do anything towards this new car. We know we're 19th, 20th on the grid. That's fine. Let's just focus on next year, which is effectively what Haas did. And it worked out in fairness for them at the start of this year. And maybe it can work out for them at the start of next season as well. Now, Ferrari, of course, the engine supplier for Haas, might also have come up with a rather similar idea. Mattia Binotto has said that yes, something is certainly wrong with Ferrari to a certain extent, the fact that they keep making these mistakes and there are some issues they have to resolve. He has doubled down on the fact that his team is good and they're learning and they're going to get there, and he's not going to make any personnel changes, this type of stuff. Maybe Binotto just needs more time. In fairness, they have been competitive this season. They have won races this season, but it's obviously not what they were hoping for, especially the way the season started, with after 3 races after Australia, it looked like Ferrari were going to be home and try to win this championship. But of course, all can change, as it most certainly has done, and now it's not even the reliability and the strategy and the pit crew and stuff that are making mistakes is actually the fact that the car isn't very good right now. I mean, it's still good, but it's not as good in even qualifying and certainly in race pace than it was before. And the Mercedes, the last few races, has been the faster race car. Maybe a similar story will be here in Monza this upcoming weekends. And even as Charles Leclerc admits, it's going to be a difficult weekend here on paper for the Ferraris. Yes, they've got the yellow vibe going on, but that's not necessarily going to be enough. The straight line speed of the Red Bull is just pretty much undefeated right now, and it certainly remains to be seen what Ferrari can possibly do about it to challenge this upcoming weekend. Now, apparently, Mattia Binotto and Ferrari are already switching their focus to next year's car, because we hear other teams do this, but you would think that Ferrari was still very much in the fight for second in the constructors. They know at this point that the world drivers, the world constructors, is not going to go their way. Red Bull will take both of those, but the fight for second in the constructors is still certainly on, and right now Mercedes are closing into about 30 points of them. Certainly the overhaul is possible by the end of the season there, and you would have thought Ferrari might be kind of fighting pretty hard for that, right? We saw Toto Wolff last night. We said that he's still certainly very committed, as are Mercedes, to winning at least one race with Mercedes this season, rather than saying that all their focus is on next year's car, because Mercedes have said, look, we need to still develop this year's car and understand it and what the upgrades do to this car to make our decisions as good as they can be for next year, because if we don't understand everything about this year's car, we can't take all the learnings into next year. So that's certainly one feature here. But this is what Binotto says, according to Giuliano De Chessa: there is little left on the development for the F175, that's this year's car, as I think for everyone. In Maranello, we are mainly working on 2023. Next year's car is born well at the moment, right? So saying that, okay, yeah, everyone to a certain extent are kind of looking to next year rather than this year, but Ferrari maybe more than most, right? He's very clearly indicating that they're focusing mainly on next year's car and not exactly going all out on this year's, which they might still be doing if they were in a real fight for the championship. Turns out their focus now is going to next year. They're kind of settling right for where they are, settling to be, second or even third in the constructors, who knows? They also, like Charles Leclerc, might well get pips to second in the drivers. I don't even think he's second anymore, right? Because Perez probably took that spot off him. So, difficult time. Maybe Leclerc got it back after the most recent race, but I barely even pay attention to that because they're just so far behind Verstappen. But, as he goes on to say, like, if there's something we should find out about what is happening right now that will lead us to subdued performance, we will have time to correct it for next year. So kind of admitting, yes, this year is effectively over for Ferrari. They are committed to next year's car, which, look, in fairness, we saw even a few months into the season, they mentioned that, yes, this year's intention was to be competitive, not necessarily to win. Then next year we're going to go for the win, right? But you kind of hear this quite a lot with Ferrari, where they say things are going well and they start off well and then things fall off a little bit and they say, you know what, there's always next year. And it seems like it's that time of the year where Ferrari have once again made the call to switch their focus effectively to next year's car and kind of give up to some degree on the F175, which is kind of sad in a way for Ferrari, especially because given how good their car has been and was at the start of the season, they should have been more competitive than they were this year, at least in terms of the pure numbers. Reliability, of course, has hurt them a lot, but even we see lately, apparently their working window is now much smaller than it used to be. We've pushed ourselves into a corner a bit. They actually believe the new floor they brought in France has actually taken them backwards. So, I don't think this is necessarily due to the technical directive per se, or maybe they brought this floor in anticipating the TD was arriving. But apparently they've now lost some drivability of the car, and that French kind of floor upgrade they brought has actually hurt them to a significant extent. So they might be looking to reverse that. Maybe the car can get a bit better as time progresses and bringing back their old floor design, at least as much as they can with the way the TD is now in place. But, still going to be difficult with Mercedes making progress, and Red Bull, of course, with Max Verstappen being effectively untouchable, it seems, right now. And obviously for this weekend, it's not like Charles Leclerc and the Ferrari guys are particularly confident, knowing that Red Bull are the favourites, knowing their deficit in the constructors and the drivers is well over 100 points now. So they know that, look, it's basically GG all around. Might as well focus on next year. Not necessarily a bad decision, but just, a pretty disappointing one, I'm sure, for Ferrari fans, given how strongly this season started out. But very much intrigued to your thoughts on all this stuff in the comment section below. Hit the like button if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new, take care, and I'll see you next time.